During our primary school days, my brother and I often visited our parental grandmother, who really loved and tolerated our childhood nonsense. She used to talk a lot about her days in Greece and the Nazi occupation. Many people in parts of Europe have suffered. She was a very determined woman, but now, having her childhood and youth stolen, had grown older and had become abandoned and forgotten, living with her son. I would like to tell you a little more about our inventiveness using her spectacles. After looking for suitable optics at some of the local second-hand shops, we borrowed her round glasses, removing the lenses from their frames, placing them in a long cardboard tubing for a telescope, enabling us to look at the moon for the very first time, fascinated by those magnificent craters. We were very excited about our discovery, and so thankful to our Grand for lending us her glasses, which we returned back in their original state a little later. She was virtually forced to remain in Ankara, where she was known as Sultana, although I'm very doubtful if this was her real name. But her daughter lived somewhere in Athens. There were a few political issues which we were never to question. One day, having written a letter to her daughter in Greece, she preferred it to be sent by us boys, as she was unable to openly correspond with her daughter, for if it was discovered by some unwanted authority, her letter would most certainly be confiscated and destroyed. My father never visited her, obviously not wanting to have any connection with his mother. It seemed she was under pressure, probably by him, never to send anything overseas, as he did not want to be discovered. My uncle was unhappy about this, while my mother knew certain things, but preferred not to say anything to us. That, too, was extremely puzzling. Considering the tattooed numbers on her arms and Star of David on her shoulder, one needed to question what her true background was. Furthermore, she had made mention certain places like Liechtenstein, and was under threat never to utter a word to us. In other words, we were to grow up not knowing anything about our origins. This may have been due to our being completely brainless, as some of our supposed relatives considered us. I also remember how our grandmother occasionally liked to have a sandwich with only salt and black pepper sprinkled in it, for that used to be the only food available for a long time in her past, when she was amongst members of the unwanted, probably in a concentration camp. We were never to know. We have tried the smallest piece of her sandwich to discover how those people were forced to live on such a meager food substance with no nutritional value. Was it perhaps due to my father's neglect? Was it deliberate so that she quickly died and did not become burden on him? It was never clear. However, that piece of bread was barely edible. The Europe of then was certainly different, and the war years, influenced by a madman twisted on preserving the perfect race, forced many to flee and seek refuge elsewhere in order to survive. At a teachers' and parents' meeting, it was unanimously decided that I, along with a few other students, should jump classes to higher ones because I apparently started my schooling a little late. It was subsequently realized that I was one of those students doing well in our class, and being above average, it was logical to put us in a senior class, at the same time giving more chances for other students to start their schooling. That was quite a surprise for our mother, and I believe she felt proud about it. Initially, I was worried about some of my school friends, who I was probably not going to see any longer, but I discovered that I could still continue associating with them as well as making new ones. As time went on, my schooling and further education continued in different places and countries. One would wonder, how could one reconcile the situation? But somehow I did have an amazing education. I was subjected to a variety of educational systems and made wonderfully diverse friends from a number of races and nationalities. However, if I had chosen only to live in Ankara, I would have had a very isolated existence, probably feeling as if I was to remain in a bubble for the rest of my life. My high schooling was spent in 2 different educational institutions in which I did well. Like me, some of my friends were interested in music. They were learning piano and composing their own songs. Others were learning clarinet or guitar. From time to time, we would get together, especially during the school holidays, and have a session together. Before leaving the country, I recorded some of those sessions on reel-to-reel tapes using a borrowed professional recording machine of huge proportions, which I carried to places. I am so happy about having recorded such wonderful memories. When I was in Ankara and spending time with my friends, who were still at high school, I recorded them singing in their native dialects, and I often wonder what happened to them after all these years. Have they lived happy and healthy lives? Are they married with children, and perhaps even grandchildren? I am sure that my brother, after having lived in the United States during his higher education days, and having settled in Turkey teaching in one of the well-known universities, would be more knowledgeable about them. Friends from those days always seem to remain special. Some names may be unremembered after such a long time, but faces are always recalled. In fact, almost all my friends from my European days are so clearly remembered. They are so strongly etched in my memories that I can easily draw their portraits as I remember them, even today. What I discovered later in my adult years, as it was also relayed to me by my beloved brother, while he was still at high school, he was forced to repeat one of the classes by having been failed. I feel strongly that it was racially motivated, as during that time he was staying in that country where some minority groups were considered as being non-Muslim infidels who did not deserve to succeed. They could not be allowed to excel, for Turks always had to be better. When I was spending time with my Turkish friends, I never sensed any biased attitudes from them, as they were completely neutral. Maybe they did not know anything about my background, which was probably a good thing. How would they have taken it if they had? Would they still have remained friends? While spending time at Gazi Lyceum and through the space club I organized, I was actively engaged in things I have previously mentioned. No matter wherever I was, I always aimed to frequent Air Force facilities, attempting to have an opportunity to fly with friends. I can never forget one occasion having climbed into one of those training planes with my friends seated at the back. After learning about the rules to follow for any type of flight and feeling very confident in doing so, we were airborne. The worried ground crew panicked, instructing us over the crackling radio, its sounds coming through an old pair of headphones, about how to return and land the plane safely at the airport, but being reasonably knowledgeable about how to fly and land the aircraft, it did not present any problem for me. Naturally, we were sternly warned never to climb into any of the planes without permission. However, my mother subsequently received a note from those same authorities asking her to give the boy a chance to learn to fly through their flight academy. A part-time tuition would be very nice indeed. But much later I took up hobby flying anyway. While living in Ankara, I became familiar with another high school, the Atatürk Lyceum, and it led me to spend my wings a little further. I became acquainted with many more peer group friends, none of whom were inclined towards any discrimination against another's belief system or race, but I still wondered how they would react if they knew all about my true background. It was better this way, but nevertheless, a very isolated existence. We dared not make a sound about our background, and, in a sense, lived undercover, as if we were criminals without being so. Living in fear in case it might be discovered who we were or what our real background was, for fear of negative repercussions. Yet the country was portrayed as being completely democratic. Armenians have contributed greatly to Turkish music and culture, but have been denied all recognition. Therefore, many Armenians chose to change their names, even their religious identity, in order to survive and succeed in Turkey, as in other Muslim countries. Many others prefer to migrate to other European countries, sometimes even taking some of the Turkish characteristics they have been subjected to from their childhood days with them, thus creating an impression in the minds of Europeans as being just the same as the natives of that other country, adhering to Muslim principles. That is probably why some European authorities, like those in Germany, have been warning their citizens in regard to what they should consider when they marry people from Muslim countries like Turkey. This attitude was very naive, because there are also many Christians coming out of those Muslim countries who adhere to Western principles. During the school holidays, when in Ankara, I was forced to work under extreme pressure on a part-time basis. Our father was angry that we were holidaying and going to school and not earning any money. It was strange because he never contributed towards our education and was apparently still talking about his desire to kill both my brother and me at the next opportunity. This was very tactfully relayed to us by our beloved mother. Helping our mother a little sounded like a great idea, and it was going to provide me with experience which I could benefit from. I found a simple job preparing adhesives in a bookbinding workshop. Soon I was binding my own books in a very old-fashioned way, and even printing gold lettering on their covers. I was thoroughly enjoying it, and was getting paid a small amount of money every Friday afternoon. It was so little compared to the European system, but I was valuing my holidays by doing something useful, while at the same time helping my mother in a very small way. Through this experience, I discovered that while still on the European continent, I could support myself and pay my further educational fees without being dependent on anybody. The prospect was exciting. Working while holidaying was indeed a very delightful idea, and total freedom was priceless. In a different period of holidaying, I was informed that my aunt's deceased husband's brother Juicy and his family needed an extra hand for their home-based business of gentlemen's clothing. They were very excited and happy to employ me, and it also became a wonderful experience. Now I could learn all about gentlemen's fashion, from cutting the materials to the final product. I learned everything one needed to know about this art, and I was now able to create my own fashion and attire if I wanted to. Juicy was very keen about Russian and French languages, encouraging their stepdaughter, Madeleine, to learn them. In those days I was once again left in the dark, for I was never told anything in detail about our real background. And I thought that maybe in time I would discover a bit more about my relatives. In my adult years I discovered, after not seeing her for a very long time, that she had studied Russian, worked for the postal and telecommunications system in a responsible position, and then, having married abroad, lived in Great Britain. Later I discovered that she is now living in Izmir, Turkey, and I believe she is happy. Juicy spoke about his special interest in magazines in multicolored sets. He loved quality, the same as his wife. They knew all about our mothers and our problems with our father, and suggested that if anyone wanted to succeed in life, it would be impossible in a place like Turkey, no matter how beautiful the country was, or how guest-friendly those native Turks might have appeared to be by outsiders. They treated me as a young, intelligent individual, and not like an idiot, as unfortunately our cousins did. For my father I was nothing more than a useless shit, as he often called me. One time, when the school holidays were on, I was ardently encouraged to help my father and learn how to repair watches. Understandably, I was extremely reluctant and very frightened of him.